The era of the DCEU is almost over, and looking back on it, one thing to me becomes very crystal clear and apparent. The DCEU rose in popularity because it was pushed by the anti-MCU movement and was seen as a sort of counterculture to what the MCU had to offer. And once most people saw that this was no longer going to be something that can be monetarily used for them to make tons of profit, they all left and went somewhere else, leaving the DCEU fandom only to the most toxic people. So I talked about this in a previous video. If you guys wanted to see my take on the whole DC fandom and how it was just a sort of lightning in a bottle movement, and I said I would make it if you guys wanted it, and I said it would piss a lot of people off, and I think it will, but hear me out. It's going to be a little bit of a longer video than you're used to. So for this, I got to take you back all the way to 2008. It was a different time at the start of that year. Marvel Studios was just about to put out its first project, quickly followed by its second project, aka Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, and Batman was seeing a sequel to a flop known as Batman Begins. Parody movies were still very hot in Hollywood, and other comic book films that year saw the release of things like Hellboy 2, Punisher Warzone, Hancock, and The Spirit. By the time 2008 was over, one thing was certain. Batman reached a whole new level of popularity, and Iron Man was huge. But nobody knew how big it was going to be, and the fan base for Marvel and DC was on equal footing come the next couple of years. Although Marvel Studios would go on and produce a lot of content, including Thor, Captain America, more X-Men movies from Fox, other films from Sony, over the next couple of years, The Dark Knight Rises would release and usher in the end of what DC was doing and promise a brand new era with Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. At this time, Marvel Studios put out the Avengers. It became the biggest comic book film of all time, and we started to see people turn on it when Man of Steel and The Dark Knight Rises would not be able to compete with it. At this time, Marvel YouTubers started to rise pretty much all over the place. Up until this point, and trust me, I was here the entire time, DC YouTubers were not really a thing. Yes, they talked about it, but they were not getting the clicks, the traction, or anything that Marvel Studios was doing. But suddenly, everything changed in the summer the Man of Steel released. After more than a year of hearing about how Marvel Studios was going to be put to the task by Man of Steel, how this was going to be the new version of what Chris Nolan had done with The Dark Knight, the film coming out and under-delivering in not just box office, but also the reviews, and a lot of DC fans being disappointed by it, we thought, well, that's kind of it, right? But things went in a completely different direction. DC quickly scrambled and announced the next film, followed by an entire slate of films. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice would be followed by close to 10 other films, including 2 Justice League films, and they were literally staking dates that Marvel was very close in proximity to. This automatically started the war. And while channels like us here continue to cover Marvel and DC, there was Marvel-only channels, which were still riding high, but then we saw the rise of the DCEU channel. And you guys probably remember plenty of their names. I don't have to go over them. Many of them appeared on this channel. They would appear on podcasts. I would appear on their pages. None of these guys are covering DC today. Many of them have stopped completely. Others have went on, started completely different channels. They've gone on, do different websites and entertainment, Twitch, you name it. But within 5 years, they were done with the DCEU. And their rise to popularity was subsequently championing everything DCEU and hating everything MCU. Because at this time, the DCEU, in my opinion, essentially became the cult of personality. You literally fell into the fan base as part of a counterculture movement to the MCU. And you guys all saw this with the memes, right? They were all over the place. Marvel for kids, DC for adults. The MCU, bright colors. The DCEU, it's rainy, it's moody, it's cinematic. Batman v Superman flopped because it was an art house film. People don't understand what art house is. Marvel, they're just generic comic book films with the same plot. And this would continue for a couple of more years. It succeeded with Wonder Woman, because you could use that as a legitimate criticism. But then we started to see this complete shift around Justice League. And when that film came out, one reason or another, it was over. All the channels that were promoting the DCEU as culture counter movement were already moving on. They weren't getting numbers. The DCEU fan base was largely abandoning everything. You could even talk about Aquaman, which was successful, but nobody was watching it, because they were picking and choosing what to watch and not watching everything. So you saw at that time that the numbers quickly start to go down for everything DC search-wise, and ultimately, it's led us to where we are today. A universe that's ending on a whimper, a universe that's lost the majority of its fan base, and a universe that's been abandoned by the most vocal people that wanted to succeed because they just wanted to capitalize on money and being the anti-MCU voice. But don't think that that's the end of it, because it's not. Because we've already seen this come back. What happened when Joker came out? The same song and dance. It's going to happen with Joker 2. The Batman, the same song and dance. And make no mistake about it, when James Gunn's DC starts, fans, new channels will spring up doing the exact same thing. History repeats itself with fandom. It's the same pattern as Star Wars fans. The original Star Wars trilogy fans grew up, and then they made a living hating on the prequels. The prequel fans grew up, and they're making a living hating on the sequels. Years from now, the sequel fans, unfortunately, unless they learn better, are going to grow up, start their own, and they're going to be toxic to the new generation. And that's how it goes. It's capitalizing on what's hot today, building a counterculture movement to whatever is popular, and literally capitalizing on it while it's hot. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. It's a little disingenuous because you see these people who don't talk about anything today, and they were giant DC fans. I'm friends with some of these people. We talk, but they haven't seen a DC film since Justice League. And don't even get me started on the other DC content surrounding all of this. This could be another 15-minute long video if I incorporated the rise of Injustice and how that literally built an entire fan base that crossed over with the DCEU, which would kind of be repeating the same thing I just did. But I kind of think you guys understand what I'm saying. The DCEU was raised up by fans, and it died because the fans left when it wasn't successful.